call this meeting to order. Are we on now? Okay. Thanks to everyone for coming to our budget work session number 3 today. We have a couple of items that we need for one item we need to vote on the consent agenda, the personnel agenda. And that is in your notebooks. I have had a request to pull out one of the people that we'll be voting on and vote on her separately, and that is the new director of HR. And I don't know if we need to pull out Lori Nolan and vote on her separately and have me abstain because she is my sister, and although she's very excited to move, I probably shouldn't vote on it. So, with the exception of those two, do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you, Mr. Benson. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Golden. Ms. Porter.
Dr. Cash?
Yes, sorry.
Mr. Benson?
Yes.
Ms. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Hurst?
Yes.
Ms. Golden?
Yes.
Okay, we'll go ahead and, I guess we can vote on Lori Nolan now. Is there any discussion on Lori Nolan? Okay, do we have a motion to approve Lori Nolan's transfer? Thank you, Mr. Benson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Cox. Ms. Porter?
Dr. Cash?
Abstain.
Mr. Benson?
Yes.
Ms. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Hurst?
Yes.
Ms. Golden?
Yes.
Okay, and finally, our Director of Human Resources, Ashley Coble. Is there any discussion?
I asked to vote on her separately. I'm having a real problem with getting HR directors, no offense to you, HR directors from businesses versus HR directors that have some school experiences. A lot of teachers have complained about how difficult it has been to get themselves recertified, and that they would think they would have everything they needed, and all of a sudden they would be told no, they didn't have everything they needed, and then all of a sudden, yeah, you do have it, and this, that, and the other. And I just think that somebody needs to know. I think there's a difference in HR with a business and HR with the school system. Unless you're going to have someone else handle the recertifications of these people. Now, I know for years and years and years, Brenda's not here, Ken Dobson's secretary handled all of that. But, you know, you get down to the crunch and you think I've got everything, and then you find out I don't have everything, and then you call up here and you get told, I'm sorry, but I only do that on Fridays, and one thing after another. So I'm having a problem with that, and I can't vote for a person that doesn't have some kind of public school experience.
Okay. Any other discussion? Are we ready to take it to a vote?
Out of the candidates that applied, was there several that reached in the top tier that had experience in public education?
Yes. I guess 2 out of the top 5 would have been school administrators as ranked by the committee.
Or school administrators, but not experienced in human resources.
No, not experienced in human resources.
Isn't there somebody in the office who handles the recertifications?
There is, that position is currently, or it's about to be vacated, and and we're in the process of trying to fill it.
And that would be the individual that deals day-to-day with recertifications, with the, communicating with teachers and that kind of thing.
When we advertise the position, I'm sorry, Jen.
I was just gonna let you know that Ashley Coble was supposed to be here at 5:15, so I may need you want me to ask her to not attend at this point. This could be very uncomfortable for her. How do you want me to handle it?
I don't know how you will stop her at this point from attending. I think it's a valid point. It's something that, we've discussed for years. The HR experience versus the school experience, and just talking to the ladies in the HR department, there are points on both sides. When you hire somebody who is a school administrator, they don't come in with the Fair Labor Standards Act knowledge or the FMLA knowledge or some of the pieces that are required to be a successful HR director. And then, like Mr. Benson said, on the flip side, if you get somebody from the business sector or the private sector, you don't get someone who understands how difficult it is to go through all the steps to renew your license and then be told at the last minute, well, I'm not counting this, so you need to go back and find another 3 points. Or it's very frustrating, and it's something we've tried to deal with here by making more internal recertification opportunities for our teachers, and our goal is every year to offer enough professional development points so that they will be covered without having to take an outside class. And most years we can do that, but not everybody takes advantage of every opportunity and gets all those credits. So we still have to go out and look for other ways to earn those points. And so it's a bit, there almost needs to be an educator HR license type process to get people, a training program or part of a master's program to get school division HR directors certified, because there are missing pieces on either side of it.
Do we advertise it that way? Sorry. Do we advertise, when we advertise, do we ask for people to have school experience, or that type of HR experience?
We ask for either or,
Okay.
but we would give preference. Ideally, you would, get somebody who has been an HR director in a smaller division, a smaller school division, but there's been so much turnover with all the neighboring counties in HR personnel over the last 2 years. Nobody was interested in making a move who had that experience.
So it's pretty much an either or situation, right?
Yeah. Based off the candidates that we had, it was either private or school administration, but we didn't have any candidates with school HR.
I think, in the legal environment that we're dealing in today, I would personally I would prefer someone with HR experience. I just think number one, it's about protecting our school division and about protecting our employees, and I think that's the most important thing right now. I agree with Bill, but we got to get that fixed. There's no doubt about that as far as certifications and so forth. And that's an area there that we've just got to deal with and we got to fix. But from a legal standpoint, I don't think there's really a choice here, in my opinion.
Okay, is there any more discussion? Do I hear a motion to approve the new employment recommendation of the new HR director?
Madam Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve Ms. Coble's new HR director.
Thank you, Mr. Hurst. You got a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Golden. Ms. Porter?
Dr. Cash?
Yes.
Mr. Benson?
No.
Ms. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Hurst?
Yes.
Ms. Golden?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. All right, I'm going to turn the meeting over to, Jess, Mr. Schultz.
Oh, my first break.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how happy Jess was today to find out he went before Chris.
36 slides of state budget, and I had no one's attention. No, that's not No, we'll go through the capital priority list and the capital list. Some of you've heard some of this before, so I apologize for repeating myself, but basically what we wanted to do with the capital projects list was try to figure out how to explain how we're meshing ESSER into our capital priorities, not only our capital priority list, but our overall capital list. So if you'll see the paperwork you were given, all of our I tried to take all the main capital list and the priority list and list all of the ESSER projects in blue. So you can see everything in blue is something that we're trying to accomplish with ESSER funds. So, so for example, if you look at your priority list, which is this one that looks like this, this was our priority list last year. All the projects listed in blue are projects that we're attempting to accomplish through the ESSER funding. So there's 6 projects on our current priority list that we're going to try to accomplish or get completed with the ESSER funding. ESSER 2 has a completion deadline of 2023. I believe it's September of 2023. ESSER 3 has a completion deadline of September 2024. So there's 6 projects on our current priority list that we're taking care of with ESSER. But if you look at the larger capital list, if you go through it as well, there are 6 additional projects in the larger capital list that we're also trying to accomplish with the ESSER funding over the same time period. So in essence, it boils down to we're trying to get 12 projects off of our overall capital list, priority and capital list, overall capital list, completed in the next 2 years using ESSER funding. And if you remember correctly, the reason for, well, anyway, it takes, all that takes, the 12 projects, we're getting more projects done in the next 2 years than we could conceivably have gotten done in any other fashion, given the funding that we've received through the ESSER deals. When we brought you the maintenance building, we purposely told you that, you know, we got all this funding coming from ESSER, so we're going to be able to do more capital projects than we ever would have using the ESSER funds. So it's going to take the pressure off of our capital fund. That would give us the ability to build the operations building and then let the capital fund rebound during the years that we're accomplishing these 12 projects with the ESSER funds. So basically my recommendation to the board, long story short, is to at this point get through both committed projects, which was the finishing of the welding lab that was committed before ESSER came into play, build the operations building, and get through these 12 ESSER funded projects, and then reevaluate this whole list. Not only the priority list, but the entire capital list. At that point, because we're picking off so many down in the list itself as well. So instead of, you know, going through and ranking a top 10 like we normally do, let's be thankful that we've got all this extra funding and we can knock off these 12 projects over the next 2 years, let our current capital fund rebound, and then reevaluate this entire list. So without getting, you know, entirely too long-winded, I guess that's my recommendation to the board as far as capital projects go. And if there's any questions about the ESSER funded projects or in blue, I'll be glad to answer them. All of them are either in the engineering phase or have been bid and we've got results back. The 2 projects that we had you guys approve over the last 2 meetings were ESSER funded projects. They represent a good number of these projects, but there's several more. I hope to have the roofs back hopefully in a month or so, and hopefully we'll get you to approve those as well. And the schedule wise, we're attempting, this is, you know, hopefully the construction market is okay, but we're attempting to get all of ESSER 2 done this summer, which gives us a cushion of 2023 to fall back on to make sure we meet the deadline. We're attempting to get all of ESSER 3 done in the summer of 2023, which gives us the cushion of the summer of 2024 if there's some sort of you know, we can't get a switchgear for a year, or we can't get a chiller for a year, or, you know, who knows what's going on right now, and that kind of thing. So the idea is to give us a cushion, a year cushion on each project, so that we can make it. And that's kind of where we are right now. So everything that's ESSER related is either in the engineering phase, in the spec phase, in the bid phase, or has already gone all the way to a signed contract.
And that includes all of the ESSER on the big list too?
Yes, ma'am.
Everything on the big list, so all 12 are either in
Well,
bid or,
I misspoke. Number 9, 11 of the overall, the only one that's not is install the rooftop unit on the kitchen. And if you'll look down there, the current status of that one, plans are to complete this project with the ESSER 3 funds if available. So we didn't want to, it's on our list that we submitted to VDOE, but if we run out of money, you know, that's one that we can put together a package and bid fairly quickly. So that's the only one that is not to that point yet. All the other 11 are.
wow. I am not sure that you could accomplish any more than those in the next 2 years.
Yeah, and that's the point, is this is gonna take so much, even at Chris's level, with the ESSER stuff, with the money tracking and the report tracking to the state, and then, you know, the oversight of the projects, and then just having the sheer manpower and time to accomplish these projects. I don't think we could do anything else anyway if our capital fund was flush.
So if I'm looking at under the cover sheet to that,
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Like
That's the
this.
current.
am I reading this right? At the bottom line, 264,000 uncommitted, and that's kind of our cushion if anything breaks?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So, for, you know, a chiller or something, you know, unexpectedly goes out, or something, an emergency expenditure, that's, right now, that would be our cushion in the capital fund to be able to handle anything like that. So, I mean, that's an adequate cushion, but it's not huge.
Right, no.
So-
And it would rebound, we estimate it would rebound within a year to a decent number, with the revenue sources that go into our capital fund. It'd be 1 year just hoping we don't have a real big catastrophe.
But you're replacing so much HVAC and so many things, and those are our most expensive items.
Yes, ma'am. We're getting both Chrysler and Snowville complete roof replacements. The two biggest projects that are critical, that are on the capital list but not on the priority list, are the rooftop unit over the Chrysler cafeteria and the rooftop unit over the Snowville cafeteria. The rooftop unit over the Chrysler cafeteria is currently dead. It doesn't work. So thank goodness ESSER's paying for it. So,
Rooftop unit over.
the Chrysler cafeteria. We are trying to do everything we can to make it limp, but it just doesn't work. It went out earlier this school year, so we wouldn't be able to accomplish it any faster. Even if we tapped into our capital funds, we couldn't. It's already actually been awarded. It was part of the $3,094,000 contract you guys awarded last budget meeting, or that emergency call meeting that we had where we awarded that contract.
So that wasn't part of the replacement at Chrysler before? We worked on?
No, ma'am. It was one of the original units there that was not replaced. There were, between the emergency chiller replacement and the rooftop replacements, we replaced everything with the exception of the cafeteria unit and the unit serving the addition. And I don't know if you guys know that much about Chrysler, but the back hallway, I call it the concrete hallway. The back hallway that actually has concrete walls versus the dividers, that's considered a new addition. New in the realm of, you know, but those were not replaced, but all of the rooftop units over the original section, which is the circular sections, were done. But the cafeteria unit was not. It is an original to the building unit.
Weren't the other ones original to the building also?
Yeah.
I can't believe they lasted 40 years.
cleans the dishwasher.
Things like I used to. No, oh my goodness.
Gold plate that and take it home with you.
Are there any other questions? Is there any more explanation needed, or does everyone kind of understand what we're driving at? Basically, let's get through the ESSER projects, because we're gonna be able to get so many projects knocked off this list with that money, and then we can reevaluate the capital plan as a whole, maybe 2023 or early 2024, depending on how the schedule shakes out and the money shake out. Are any other questions about the ESSER funds? Glad to answer those as well. The best of my ability, might need help. Correct.
Are there any, I guess it's not probably a capital discussion, but from a maintenance and building standpoint, are there any things coming out of the General Assembly this year that, add things to your list?
They will add things to our
Or
list?
take away or whatever?
No, there's some more funding. There's
Funding.
there's the potential for some more funding, and Chris can speak a little bit more about that specifically. We haven't really been given any guidelines on how that funding, and it's not finalized. It's more or less in the voting stage.
Right, Ms. Cox, so the governor's introduced budget had some funds, I think $500 million statewide for school construction needs. And so our portion of that is projected to be $2,392,000. That's the governor's introduced budget. My understanding of the Senate and House budgets, they've, of course, made some changes to that. I think the Senate version would have us receiving most of that. The House version takes that $500 million and leverages some loan repayments to create more funding. That's my understanding, that would be available to localities to apply for. We obviously, and we haven't received the calc tools and the analysis of either one of those budgets yet. I read, what I could, but really we haven't received anything from the DOE budget office to give us any indication of what we would receive for either of those plans, and we don't know what the conference committee will come up with. I do feel like we will, in either case, we will receive something from the state for school construction needs that we had targeted for the school capital fund to be able to carry over, because the legislation allows you to carry over for a couple of years, or at least to the end of the biennium. And then if we do receive something, I think we would need to come back and make some decisions as to what that would be used for. So that's all I know at this point. But I do feel like we'll get something from the state. There seems to be a push from both houses to allocate something to schools for school construction needs. It's just, it's taking different forms, depending on the budget bill.
That would only help this situation, help our capital fund rebound even faster.
Right.
We don't know yet if it would come with strings.
Exactly.
Gotta be spent on.
The House version, I think, does come with some string. My understanding is it would require about 70% local funding to get about 30% state funding. You would end up would have more money in total, but I think it requires a greater local share. So then that would just depend on what monies we would have to be able to match to qualify for that.
When I heard that budget item discussed, it sounded to me like they were really wanting that bill to focus on very large projects within schools.
And I think that is the intent, is to actually build a certain number of schools. Whereas the governor's the way the governor's budget allocated, you know, they basically use the funding formula and just allocate it for every school division to receive money, regardless of if they needed to build a new school or needed it for renovations or what have you. So, yeah, I get, they're very different. My understanding is they're very different bills. They're very different in how each one of those are structured.
The ESSER money on these projects that we've done over the next couple of years, I need to say that money will be flowing out incrementally. You know, so, we only have we only have 264,000 here in uncommitted capital funds. A lot of that money right there, I mean, if we had a major expense such as an HVAC or a system go out or a roof, most of that is ESSER eligible, correct? So that gives us a little bit of, you know.
We could probably amend.
We could always amend the application. Just depends on if we could stop a project that was already in.
Yeah.
Signed and committed contractual.
Right.
Okay. You know, and without going back and looking at where we are on this year's budget, Chris, I assume there, you know, typically, you know, a little bit of carryover. I mean, if you know, Chris is not going to commit to nothing, and I understand that, but we might have a couple dollars of carryover money.
Sure.
Let me ask you this: do you recall what the debt service payment will be for next year as well?
I believe it's
around four.
I think it's about the same amount as we received, the 422,000 that we received this year.
Okay. We just got that money this past week, correct?
Pardon?
I said we just got 400-some thousand.
Yes, sir.
County this
Yeah,
past
just last week.
Yeah.
And the other thing to keep in mind too is that, again, these funds that I'm showing, the 264 is after deducting for our commitments. That's not, our cash balance is actually more than that. The storage and maintenance, but we haven't issued first check on that construction. The construction's begun. So, you know, there is a chance that
We'll receive not only year-end money, but the second debt service payment into the capital fund.
by the time we paid out.
Before we even pay out the completion of
Right.
that project.
That's,
So, you know, it's gonna be, as you said, incrementally.
yeah.
So, all right. So that's my recommendation to the board at this time, so there's no vote or anything on that particular item. That's where we are.
What's the status of your operations building?
We have the pad, it's graded. We have to do a little bit more geotechnical work up there before we can pour the footers. Once that's done, it should start moving pretty quickly. Okay.
Okay, well, any other questions for Mr. Shaw? I'm so excited. Every year we look at that capital improvement wish list and I think, I will be dead before we get all those things off of that list.
Yeah, in 2 years, it's gonna be a much different list. It's gonna be a very, very different list. It'll be a very, positive meeting to go through it and get rid of a lot of things and reestablish new priorities.
Oh, I'm so excited about that. Roofs are not, people don't see them, but,
There's not a lot of flash.
no, but you know if a roof leaks.
And we have active leaks.
We did, the van roof leaked again last rain event, so.
Yeah, rained a lot, last rain event.
It leaked a lot.
All right, Chris, are you ready to take over now with our,
Yes, ma'am. If you all are ready, I am ready. I promised I would do this, the last meeting, I would do this in the form of a rap, but I'm not sure I can do,
would anybody object if I shut the blinds? I don't need to distract me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. I know. Oh, is he
So, school board members, I wanted to, put some of their, try to condense a lot of the requests and proposals that we've heard over the past several budget meetings into one presentation. So I apologize again that it won't be brief, but I did try to condense where possible. And first and foremost, I want you all to know this is not coming to you in the form of a recommendation tonight. This is not a proposed budget. This is a items for your consideration, where I've tried to take various proposals and requests that we've heard and put dollar amounts to them and just have, these are discussion points. So at any time, if there's something that we have left off that is a priority, this is your time to please give us feedback and make us aware of what those priorities are. And we can certainly add those or change these in any way. So please know that this is not anything set in stone. So first of all, I did want to address that as of today, we have not received, as Dr. Shears mentioned, we have not received the calc tools needed for the House and Senate budgets. So for purposes of this presentation, we're still using the governor's budget. That does give us some pause because we do feel like the governor's budget is maybe the best case scenario for air funding and whatever I don't know that for fact, but with the Senate and House budget bills so far apart in terms of their priorities, whatever gets approved, we may be seeing less state funding. So again, that just be aware that we're operating off of a projected amount from the governor's budget.
And on that note, while I'm thinking of it, if we don't get the calc tools in probably tomorrow or Thursday, we may have to call a meeting later in March to vote on the final budget proposal instead of trying to do it next week. Because Chris will need a couple of days to figure it all out once we get the calc tools, and we expect to receive them this week, but we may not. So I guess slide number 3, it mentions the projected increase that was previously presented to you in state funding of $3,571,675, and below you'll see that additional money for the school construction grant program in the governor's budget, the $2.392 million. The next slide I did want to mention, I think I mentioned this before in our state original state revenue update. The projected increase in state revenue for at-risk funding is one category that I noticed, and the VDOE budget office had made everyone aware that to be careful of the decrease that is showing in year 2 of the biennium. So if you look at that figure, that dollar amount is supposed to go up by $1,104,734 in FY23. However, in FY24, in the governor's budget, it would have us being decreased by $634,114. I assume that the intent of that is to create more monies in year 1 to help with the learning loss that we know is so prevalent with their students statewide and nationwide. Therefore, that there was a decrease in that funding category for year 2. Again, I mentioned that the budget office has explicitly warned us to be aware of that, and especially if those funds were to be used for recurring costs. So using that, all of that funding, at-risk funding increase for pay raises or added positions or anything that would end up being a recurring cost has the potential to result in, I guess, what I would call significant harm for the budget the next year. And I
I cannot recommend us getting into a situation where we would not be able to either provide raises or even have a reduction in force if we relied upon all of that at-risk funding for the FY23 budget. So the recommendation would be to use the second year, I don't want for this to be confusing, but to use the FY24 at-risk funding as a placeholder for next year's budget so that we can absorb any that second year loss and not have to, not have it really affect negatively our FY24 budget. So the revised projected increase in state revenue that I'm showing, if we account for that difference, the increase would then be $2,937,561 rather than the $3.5 million that I previously presented. Obviously, if that comes to pass, that we will still receive that additional money, and we would have to work on some matching some one-time uses that we would have with that money. It's definitely not going to go to waste. We have a lot of needs that we can match that up with, and Dr. Sears and I have already discussed a couple ways that we could utilize those funds, possibly for extending the virtual academy another year, or some other types of things that might be well suited for those funds. So just wanted to mention, I guess on slide 7, as you're aware, we did during the current year, we added some positions after the year began due to COVID-19 and other operational needs that have arisen, and we do need to budget for those. We were able to absorb those in this year's budget due to vacancies, but we still have to include those in the budget for next year. So those would be the third Cougar assistant at the high school, a transportation manager that I think we're getting ready to hire in the coming weeks, the public relations specialist, and then a rotating school nurse. And thank goodness we have added that position. I don't know how we would function now without that rotating nurse substitute. The total projected cost of salaries and benefits for those positions is approximately $244,625 for FY 2023. Next, with our teacher salary scale, as you all know, every year we try to do a comparison of our teacher salary scale with other surrounding school divisions. This year's comparisons show that we're very competitive. Good news, we're very competitive at the beginning of the scale and at the end of the scale. So if you're a starting year teacher, we're paying well above average for a starting teacher, and then also well above average for someone with 30 years of experience. However, we do show some a decline pretty rapidly after year 0 in how those steps are structured getting up to later in a teacher's career. That would be especially true when we compare a pay scale to Bradford City Public Schools. So the next couple slides, I'm showing a graph, and this is still very good news because in years past we've been below the average. So it's very good news that the green line is for Pulaski County Public Schools, and you can see we are above average right now for the schools in our school systems in our area. The next slide kind of just shows, if you want to directly compare us to Bradford City Schools, you can see Bradford, being the orange line, has a more, what's the mathematical term? Basically a straight line slope, thank you, PhD student. A straight line slope, whereas as you can see, ours kind of starts to dip by comparison, and then we start taking off in year 20, and then by year 25 and 30 we eclipse. But that still does not account for that dip as we see between, I guess, years 5 and 20, which most of that is due to, with Bradford, after, studying their scale, most of the initial steps that Bradford uses for their scale, and they immediately start off with steps of $500 per year, whereas we kind of start off slow with 200 and then build up to 400, and by the time you get up to year 15 and 20, we're behind, and we have to go up significantly higher in those steps to catch up and exceed them. That's good for for your retirement, because your retirement would be based on your 3 years of high salary. However, there's still compensation that the teachers are losing in between in their pocket as compared to a teacher across the bridge. So just wanted to show that as we talk about in the next couple slides.
So is that where we generally lose teachers to, the city of Bradford?
And Montgomery County.
And Montgomery County.
Those are the primary two that will lose in a bit, that will lose teachers to.
But we are closer to, and probably have the potential to get closer to Bradford City Schools than we would Montgomery County Public Schools, quite frankly.
I just wondered how the same graph would hold true with any other surrounding school systems in Wood County.
And I can definitely do the same comparison, and
I think the fact that we're above the average means that we're probably better than the majority of the surrounding counties, probably other than Bradford and Montgomery. I say overall, we're probably at least
overall.
right in or above everyone else.
Any idea what kind of raise they're gonna be offering this year?
I know Montgomery County has been recruiting teachers on their proposed starting salary of $47,000. Now, whether or not they can actually do that, I think is questionable. That is what they're using to try to recruit teachers in right now, that they are proposing a budget that has a starting salary at $47,000. So it's probably $4,000 more than what they pay currently, because we are just, at the starting salary, we're only about $300 less than they are right now.
So to begin, if we would want to address this disparity, looking at improving our scale, we would need to start increasing those steps in the early stages of a teacher's career. So again, I've worked on actually several salary scales, but this is just one that I've put up here tonight. This is not, again, anything final, but that would begin increasing these early steps while keeping the later steps constant or slightly lower. The reason I would do that is to make it, I guess, financially doable. If we keep the steps at the high end the same while trying to increase the other steps, it really becomes significantly costly to try to do. So if we would want to work on, again, none of our teachers would lose money, especially ones at we're just dealing with percentages. So to get those initial steps higher and be able to handle it financially, we would need to kind of keep the other steps at the higher end stable to increase the other steps. That's just one scale to put out there for you to look at. The scale that I'm providing for you tonight would provide a minimum 5% pay increase to all teachers, but most would receive higher percentage increases based on the step that they're on. And the projected cost of that new teacher salary scale, including the step increase for teachers, would be $1,541,238. That includes the additional cost of VRS and FICA with that. I know that's very tiny on this slide, that scale, but I've provided in your notebook, there's actually a larger copy for you to look at of that scale. Just something for you to look at and think about. Onto the custodial salary scale. The next increase in the Virginia minimum wage is scheduled for January 1st, 2023, and that will go from $11 per hour to $12 per hour. If you remember from last year's budget process, you all voted to increase their custodial starting wage to $1 above the minimum wage that was going to take effect January 1st of this year. So that was increased to $12. So if we would, and also we did that for school nutrition staff as well, starting hourly rate. If we want to keep that same approach in place for next year, at least $1 per hour above the state minimum wage, we would need to adjust our custodial pay scale again for next year and make that starting rate $13 per hour. So I provided a proposed custodial salary scale for you to look at, which would cost $104,981. That includes the employer paid fringe benefits. That kind of keeps the same percentage steps that we currently have in place, which is 1.25%. And again, that would make the starting rate $13. I did not show one yet for school nutrition employees because that scale only affects the school cafeteria fund and not our school operating budget. But we'll provide that to you at a later meeting for you to look at as well.
Chris, how do we compare with other counties in regards to this pay scale? Are we competitive?
We are competitive with other school systems as far as their custodial pay scale, and I can provide that comparison to you as well. However, we don't really lose custodians to other school divisions. We lose them to the private sector.
Yeah, our competition for custodians is already Volvo, you know.
Oh, okay.
And
Well, that's not
even
really affecting us filling the positions and things like that.
Not the other school systems where, you know, unlike teachers where you're pretty much competing against other schools, we're competing against businesses.
And it's hard when, you know, Target and Chick-fil-A and everyone else are advertising 15, 16, you know, all the hourly rates, and they can just raise the prices on their chicken sandwiches, but we can't, or their products in the store, but we're locked into where we are for an entire budget cycle, so.
Well, with this type of hourly position, it makes sense that we would lose them to other surrounding employers who have hourly positions, and, you know, Hardee's and James Hardy and the others are paying much more with nice benefits.
And, you know, I would say that we have a higher percentage of custodians that actually live in Pulaski County, probably versus some of our professional employees, that the percentage may not be as great.
Well, I would say at $13 an hour, you couldn't afford to drive back somewhere else.
It's probably the second most difficult. It's probably the second most difficult position to fill in the school system.
Second behind
Bus
bus
drivers,
drivers.
then third being teachers.
Yeah.
It's just on a different scale, a different level, because teachers, you're dealing with a much larger number. Because, you know, there's so many more teaching positions versus those positions. But if you did it by percentage, it would be a much higher percentage. I'm 6 short right now. Only got 38.
Custodians. If you're hiring them at this very entry level, you got a lot of competition out there for them to go to work with zero experience somewhere else for up to $5, $6 more per hour, or a little bit more. And you know, there's an employer down the road that's having walk-in interviews on a regular basis.
I'm aware.
Your employees told you.
Very well aware.
And in benefits, day one.
So the next page, the paraprofessional salary scale. I'm trying to incorporate a lot of different, I guess, things that have been, requests that have been made for our paraprofessional staff into one section here. Last year when we addressed the minimum wage change with our custodial scale and our school nutrition scale, we did not make any change to the paraprofessional scale other than the 5% that everyone received, the pay increase. So with that not being adjusted, if our custodial starting pay is raised to $13 an hour, if we keep this scale the same again, we're gonna have the issue of the custodian's scale surpassing the paraprofessional scale, relatively speaking. So we felt like this would be a good time to look at changing that scale, increasing that starting hourly rate to $14 per hour. The cost of this pay scale, to make it a little simpler, although we can factor it out, also incorporates the proposal to convert all of the remaining part-time paras to full-time status. So the current paraprofessional salary scale is basically two scales in one. It's a scale for full-time paras and a scale for part-time paras. This, at least for purposes of discussion tonight, creates one unified scale that assumes that the part-time paras would be made full-time. But again, we can go back and adjust that. So you'll see that starting hourly rate would be $14, and this is also provided in a different handout for you in your notebook. And that starting annual salary would be $17,836.
And this would have been unthinkable a few years ago when we had between 80 and 90 pairs, but now that Ms. Poach has worked through the process with BDOE and we've scaled back those numbers by about 40% reduction in the number of pairs, it's probably something that's easier to do, and it might actually help us be able to attract applicants in, because do we have all the pair positions filled currently?
I just looked at that, we have at least 6, and with the 2 that I just saw up there, probably 7 to 8. And consistently, when we offer a position and the para doesn't take it, what we're hearing is they want full-time.
Well, they also when you do as a substitute.
Oh, yeah.
The rate for
Right.
substitutes higher than a para rate.
That's a great point, Ms. Becker. That right now, I'm not adjusting that scale, and we've added more money to our substitute pay. We have created that imbalance between substitutes and paras as well.
I will tell you, our paras work very, very hard. They do an excellent job. They receive a lot of training. It's a very difficult job, especially now that they're assigned as one-to-ones, and we typically are giving them to children who either have intense medical needs or intense behavioral needs. So, I mean, they're working their tails off. Just felt like I need to advocate for them just a little bit.
So the total cost of implementing this new para scale, including converting, and I do want to make a mention of one error that I have a typo there in the, not the dollar amount, but I said, I have here 19 part-time paras and it's actually 17. So please make that change. But the dollar amount is actually correct there. Into full-time, those part-time paras into full-time employees was approximately $142,376. That includes the step for, that initial step for making the change in the pay scale. That includes the additional dollar amount pay for those part-time paras to convert them to full-time. Also, Ms. Polcha had conducted a survey of those part-time paraprofessionals to see which ones felt like they would elect health insurance if moved to full-time status, and 9 indicated they would. We did not get from them which option they wanted, either employee only or family, what have you. But if we just estimated on the employee-only option for health insurance, then the additional estimated cost, employer cost, would be $73,008. And those two costs, if we were to offer, full-time status to, or make those paraprofessionals full-time, then that health insurance, we would have to, they would be above 30 hours per the Affordable Care Act, and they would have to be offered health insurance as our other employees are. So that's a cost that we would have to go along with, or projected costs that would go along with making them full-time. Now, I guess a separate category of when we're looking at and I mentioned this, I think, in a prior meeting, separate category for the full-time status of our paraprofessionals would be whether we cover them with VRS. That's kind of a separate question. That is an employer option. VRS allows us to, at the school board, to determine which position classifications we make VRS covered and which ones are not. And so that again, this is a school board. That is a school board determination. I did conduct a survey of school divisions in our region, Region 7, asking them how they structure their paraprofessionals or teachers' aides, how they classify them. And they basically ended up in two categories. One, like us, they have full-time and part-time paraprofessionals, or in a few cases, they only have full-time paraprofessionals. But I will say in almost every case, their full-time paras, they have them covered under VRS. We are an exception to our region in terms of covering those full-time paras with VRS. Again, that is our choice, that's our option, but we are not, we are unorthodox, I guess, when comparing that position classification to other school divisions in our region.
What other groups in our employment base do we not cover with VRS?
Paraprofessionals are not covered with VRS. Our bus drivers are currently not covered with VRS. Those are the major two categories of contracted employees. We have a few, our Cougar assistants are not.
Interpreters.
Rotating subs.
A portion of our S&P staff.
Right.
The school nutrition is covered, but,
We have some that we just hired in, don't we have some that we're waiting to move?
they're only work agreements.
So are of those, all of those aren't part-time positions?
That's correct. So our Cougar assistants work full-time hours, but they are not, they've never been made VRS covered. Of course, there's not a large, there's three of them, there's not a large number.
Custodians are full-time?
Custodians are full-time, they are VRS.
Custodians and maintenance, the only ones in my sector who are not are bus drivers and what we call substitute and or car drivers.
The bus paras.
And bus paras, which I operate 30-some. So
The
bus paras are not, but I mean, they work a much different schedule. I mean,
Yeah.
they work more on transportation schedule.
Interpreters, they're full-time, they are not VRS.
Well, don't you think that maybe that's part of the problem with recruiting people and keeping them if you're not giving them the benefits that the place down the road is going to?
That very well could be. Ms.
Guarantee
Coble.
you wouldn't keep me around.
Well, some of the lower wage jobs, some of them want to elect out. They don't want the 5% taken from their
Well.
pay.
Yeah, that is something to
That's
keep
not
in
an option.
mind, and I'll mention that later, but if we were to make all paraprofessionals VRS covered, several things. One, it's an all or nothing approach, so you can't you know, it's not a ask, you know, it's, you're covered with VRS now because you're a full-time paraprofessional. And the second thing is, you're gonna be paying 5% an employee contribution, for VRS benefits. So if you get a 5% raise, we're gonna take it right back by you paying into VRS. And this board is right. I know her, she gets a lot of, especially the school nutrition employees who will come to her and say, can I opt out of this? And I'm sorry, you can't. I guess they, you know, they maybe don't understand the benefits down the road.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it makes a difference on eating right now or not, you know. Doesn't matter down the road.
Exactly.
That's a good point on that. I forget about that. Mandatory, I don't know how I forget about that.
Yeah. So that is something to keep in mind if we were to make an entire class of employees VRS. You know, if we didn't give 5%, then they would actually lose money in their pay. If we were to give a 2 or 3% pay increase, but then start taking 5% out of their pay, they would actually have a pay decrease. So there's pros and cons.
And when you're talking about bus drivers, I mean, you gotta, I don't know, I mean, most of them are retired anyway, they'd rather have the cash. So, instead of taking the 5%, if it's later in the slides, that'll be apparent. I happen to have seen the whole presentation already.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
The hours that a bus driver works are, work out better, I guess, for those who are retired or have that flexible day.
Well, it used to be a farmer was our primary bus driver, but farmers are few and far between now.
So, again, so just cut to the chase, the additional employer costs of making all of our paraprofessionals VRS covered positions would be approximately $247,320. I will say when we get to the bus drivers, you're going to see that the projected costs would be much less for bus drivers, and that's because there's actually two different groups for VRS. One is what the state calls the professional group with teachers and administrators, and that's a statewide group for purposes of determining the actuarial cost of that pension, and that is the group where the General Assembly determines the employer contribution rate for that group. And currently, I think it's 16.62% that we pay on top of someone's salary for being in that group. And paraprofessionals, my understanding from talking to these other school divisions, have not talked to VRS, but I'm pretty sure they're all correct, that they would fit in that professional group. Whereas bus drivers fit in the non-professional group, and what we pay for them is a little more than 5% for their benefits. So it's a huge difference in that employer cost. So I think I've already discussed some of these. If converted to VRS, it's an all or nothing approach. In those areas or any employees would not have the ability to opt out unless they wanted to become part-time. They would have to begin paying the mandatory 5% employee contribution. And then if we chose to do this, I would also need to communicate with VRS to see if there's any additional work that they have to do, since you know, they make their actuarial assumptions based on their current employees, and that would be a large group for us to bring on for VRS purposes. So I guess moving on, if there are no questions about the pairs, bus driver compensation and recruitment and retention. As you know, our comparison for our bus driver scale to surrounding school divisions show that our pay compares favorably to others. We're ranked either 1 or 2 at each step in the scale, which I can't say that about just about any other position. So the work that we did on the bus driver scale several years ago was really helpful, as much as it could be. But nonetheless, we're still challenged by recruiting bus drivers and retaining our existing drivers. So we definitely wanted to look at compensation and benefits proposals to address this issue. So if you look at the next slide and see that graph, it's kind of showing you Pulaski counties in green. So we're actually doing very well. And fortunately, I know we have lost one or two over the years to a neighboring county, but we generally don't lose a lot of bus drivers to other school divisions. We may lose them to other CDL-related jobs, like driving a bus for Abbott or something like that. But
I think we lost 2 in about 5 years.
yeah.
We stole one and gave it back.
So I guess to explore some different options here for benefits, and again, we have not done a survey of our bus drivers to see, and I think really that would be important for us to do, to actually see what I believe, what they want, what they feel like would be beneficial, what they value.
It would need to be, you know, not just ask them if they want insurance. Somebody, you know, I have to explain it to them.
Right.
You know, that you're gonna lose the 5%.
I think they need to hear the same thing we've heard here tonight from Chris,
Oh, yeah.
and the 5%, and that's what it costs to have a retirement.
And then the fact that.
I've had a couple of them tell me that they would like to have retirement.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of them tell me that they would like to have health insurance.
Yeah. The other thing they gotta understand too with health insurance is, and I've had this conversation with about 4 of them once before, when they thought they got health insurance, they thought it was free. I had to explain to them, no, you know, I pay for health insurance, Dr. Sears pays for health insurance, Chris pays for health insurance. If we offer you health insurance, then you have the option to purchase health insurance. So we probably need to go through the whole thing and see what their feedback is.
Mhm.
It's an odd workforce because most of them are either, a lot of them are Medicare, Medicaid, or already retired, whereas the VRS isn't going to be a draw to. But it could be to some, so I think it's worthwhile to put it to them and do a survey of them.
So if health insurance, now again, currently we don't offer health insurance to any employees that are contracted for less than 30 hours, but I'm just assuming in this situation that we would, and what that would cost. And again, I just pulled a number out of a hat. So if 20 drivers, which may be more than would ever take their health insurance plan, but if 20 drivers opted for the employee-only health insurance option, then that added employer cost would be $162,240. Again, that's just a number pulled out of a hat. I don't know how many would actually take it. If all of our contracted bus driver positions were added to VRS, the projected additional employer cost would be $71,529. As you can see, that amount is much, much less than what it would cost to cover paraprofessionals with VRS due to the fact that it's 2 different groups and 2 different contribution rates. As I mentioned here, you know, making all our contracted bus drivers VRS covered positions, just several things to be aware. The mandatory 5% contribution, we would be, again, I guess now covering part-time employees with potentially health insurance, whereas we have other, or VRS, and we now have other full-time employees that are not covered with any benefits. And then also, we had to explore this, if any drivers are retirees from state or local government, we would have to make sure that they would fit under a critical, hard-to-fill position in which they wouldn't influence their, or affect their retirement benefit that they're already receiving. So, it just does what it does.
I have several that we have to work. We can only work a part of the year because if I work them the entire year, it affects their
Social Security.
Not only Social Security, but it's yes.
Yeah, so they
It
work
does.
up to that $15,000.
Right. We have some that we work with in that regard.
What does the school division pay toward the single policy?
$8,112.
So, what's that come out to a month?
For me, like if it was just, mine's
Yeah.
105.
What's
but
the,
I pay the,
what's the employer cost per
Yeah.
month?
employer cost, not the employee.
I'm used to doing budgets here. $676.
So if the paying into the health insurance was the issue, could we not do like a health savings plan for bus drivers and where we put $250 a month into it and they don't have to?
I think with health savings, I think with a health savings account, it has to be tied to a high deductible health plan.
Okay.
So
it can't
if-
just be,
So, that's my understanding. If an employer contributes to a health savings account, it has to be tied to a high deductible health plan.
I know Wythe County does something where they put like $150 a month.
They put $100 a month into an annuity,
Okay, I know
like a retirement type of annuity. It's not a health savings account, I don't
that.
think.
Okay.
Would that affect their retirement if you put it into an annuity?
I don't know, but we'd have to explore that. I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think so.
Unless they take it out.
Right, right. I think it would have to be done, I guess using one of their approved vendors. I guess the only issue is if we did that, we would have to, I assume it would be mandatory that we would make that, and so we would rely on the bus driver to have to visit one of our vendors and open up the annuity, and then us make those contributions on a monthly basis. Sometimes that, I know that sounds real easy, but
It's a struggle.
we struggle with that. We struggle with getting folks their money when they retire. If it's over $5,000 and we put it in an annuity, we've had to call and badger people to open up an account so we can give them their sick pay.
If and when my wife ever decides to retire, you just put it in mine.
I'll put it in your account. Okay. But that's something we can explore, Dr. Sears.
I can see health insurance being a draw, maybe to get some younger self-employed drivers in that don't have the health insurance options since they're self-employed.
Yeah, I think like I said, I think it's a very strange workforce. You have very different needs in that workforce than you do in your everyday workforce. So it would be something. Yeah.
I knew somebody that was a farmer who drove a bus because where
They
they
got
were
health
driving, they got
insurance.
health insurance.
I think the health insurance could be a draw. I do. I think the option.
And the fact that it's optional and not mandatory.
That's
like
exactly
VRS.
right, where you can decline it. I think the VRS, but I mean, we can take it to them and see, but I think the VRS with most of my drivers is not gonna be it may or may not be, I don't know. Just from the few conversations I've had. But it'd be good to get them all in a room and explain it to them.
And at their age, the number of years it takes to get vested and
Right.
to actually
For
put
VRS to
in
be
enough to get
worthwhile, yeah,
anything.
that's
yeah.
correct.
Well, if it's gonna be made available to them, if and when it would be, it has to be presented to them as an option by somebody here.
Yeah,
That's
Yes.
required.
Right.
yeah. But I mean, we're talking about just doing a survey to see if, let's say we do the VRS and 40 or 30% of my drivers wanted it and 75% didn't. But it's an all or nothing situation. We don't want to upset them and have them say, well, I don't want you to take my 5%, I'm not driving anymore. I don't want to be a part of the VRS.
Right.
I think that's why we need to talk to the group
Ahead of time.
ahead of time
Right.
and get a feel for what that group sees as a benefit.
I understand, and not everybody is real fond of the 5% going into something that they don't really have any
Any
control
control
over.
over, that's correct.
And, may not have the best of returns
A
on.
lot of I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
A lot of these drivers are already retired and already drawn a pension.
Right.
And wouldn't want the, that's what I'm saying, we need to we need to poll them as a group and see what their, I think the health insurance would be a bigger draw to us than the VRS. But and I don't know if it's something with the VRS, if you can just say everybody that already works here is grandfathered, we're not gonna offer it, but any new hires from this point forward will be covered by the VRS.
Now, if we wanted to keep the, I guess, right now, our practice of using that, the Affordable Care Act standard of 30 hours a week being that determiner for full-time benefits such as health insurance, you know, would it be possible to create a full-time bus driver position / whatever position to where a person would voluntarily, if they would want to work 30 hours or more, in the time that they're not driving, helping out in school, doing something, and then getting those health insurance benefits? Would that be, I guess, an option? And that would kind of
We
gives an option to the,
parents.
right, that would kind of give an option to the, maybe if there's a majority of drivers that want to just keep everything as is and they don't want health insurance, but there's some that are young and would like to work more and get health insurance, that would give them an avenue, but it also would keep us, keep us in line with what our standard is for full-time versus part-time employment.
So would,
For example, if they wanted to come into a school and help do lunch duty or hall monitoring,
I was gonna
we
say,
have lots of
it's
jobs,
30 hours.
things that we could have them do.
Custodian over those
Mhm.
few hours in the middle of the day.
And earn health insurance benefits.
The pay rate's what we gotta figure out there, if we pay them a flat pay rate or if we pay them two different pay rates.
Right.
Because you can't translate the bus driver pay rate to so much higher than everything else. On
The
an
other
hourly
piece we had to
situation.
play with was the hours, because if you work them straight through on, from the morning route all the way to the evening route, they end up in overtime really fast. So we had to, when we were looking at it, you had to essentially shave an hour right after their first route, give them an hour break, and then right before the last route, give them an hour break. So they were working a small piece in the middle with 2 hours on either end to keep them from going into
That wouldn't-
20 hours.
Yeah, that wouldn't be on. Because I mean, if you start in the morning and finish in the evening, you're 10 and a half, 11 hours a day.
You know what? I think this is the solution for this. It's probably gonna come out by asking the bus drivers what's best.
Yeah, that's why I think we need to have a meeting with the bus drivers and put it to them and see if they're even interested in.
Would it be possible to get a meeting with them before we propose a budget?
I can try.
And they might need that chill time before they get in a steel tube with
Yes.
a few kids.
I mean, I've had 2 people this week been trying to figure out. One, Ethleen's working with now, and I've only had 2 people that really were interested in driving a bus, working in a school, and then driving a bus.
It's a long day.
2 people. I mean, it's a long day, because you start a bus at 6:30, you finish 4:30, 5 o'clock. So without the big break in the middle of the day,
I have never done it, and I will probably never do it, but I commend them for the patience they have on those buses.
it's a very difficult job.
I can imagine. It was difficult for me as a student to ride a bus. But everybody else.
I bet you bus driving had love.
He liked me, but I got them all quiet.
Well, I think we could pair them up where a driver would do the morning run and then work as a para, and they're paired with somebody in the same school, might be a cafeteria worker that comes in for the lunch and then does the evening route. And on that same bus, and have 2 drivers doing the route, if we could, that requires a whole lot of coordination to make that work, but at least then they're not, spending 10 or 11 hours a day to be paid for 8.
Great job for that new transportation.
It's gonna be your new favorite employee.
So I guess moving on, to look at compensation, in addition to the benefits options. If we chose to address compensation, either rather than or in addition to benefits, just an option would be to currently our daily rate for starting bus driver is $80.36 per day. If we were to basically take the amount of money that we've talked about for benefits and put it towards compensation, increasing it to 90 per day, that would be an annual of $16,290, making each step a 1.25% increase. That initial raise would range from 11.64 to 12.68%, depending on where they're at on the step. And the cost of that would be $135,751. And I've provided another sheet that has that in a larger format, but that just kind of shows what that scale would look like. That would be a very high daily rate. I mean, that probably would put us right on par with Montgomery County schools or public schools currently, where they're at on their bus driver pay. Any further discussions on bus driver before we move on? No, Robert, that's what this meeting's for. So support staff raise so basically after excluding the cost of these other salary scales that we've covered for teachers, custodians, paraprofessionals, and bus drivers, for the remaining workforce that we haven't discussed previous to now, the cost of providing a 5% raise would be estimated at $384,407. That does include the increase in VRS and FICA for those employees. The next slide. So as I mentioned, we've had a number of different requests from principals, and again, this is just a starting point for discussion. But after meeting with Dr. Sears, we have condensed the teaching positions that have been requested, looking at student enrollment, new programs that we would like to start, or providing more instruction in specific areas. So the 5 positions that we have identified here for your consideration this evening would be 1, an additional teacher at Coble due to the student enrollment increase, an additional CTE teacher, that would be to start the EMT program that Ms. Atkinson has covered in a previous meeting, an additional elementary gifted teacher. We previously had 2 positions, and we eliminated 1 several years ago. There has been a request to reinstate that position. Also, an additional elementary art teacher and music teacher. The projected cost of adding these 5 teaching positions, and this would be based on the new teacher salary scale, plus benefits would be $322,735. And again, this is just a starting point for discussion, so if there's any other positions that we previously reviewed and some presentations and requests, we certainly add them.
And the additional art music, that's just what we call it. It could be 2 tech ed teachers, if that's the route we would rather go and bring tech ed into our elementary schools. We just put those in there because that was request art music were the terms requested most, but it doesn't have to be those 2 subjects.
Okay, so I guess moving on, an additional assistant principal position at Pulaski County Middle School. When Pulaski Middle School and Belleville Middle School were combined into one, we did eliminate an administrator position. We previously had a principal and assistant principal at both schools, and now we're at PCMS, we have a principal and 2 assistant principals. Also, we currently, at PCMS, we currently have a part-time athletic director, which is a 10-month teacher with additional athletic director duties, even though we've added a significant number of sports to that school, and actually still adding more. We feel like a additional administrator is currently needed at the middle school to handle student discipline, coverage of athletic and after-school activities, student supervision, and other duties. So for your consideration and discussion would be an additional 11-month assistant principal position at PCMS that would serve more or less as a dean of students as well as the athletic director for the school. The estimated cost of that position with an 11-month contract would be $93,056. I think everyone's tired because the conversation just kind of ended.
And on that, discipline has skyrocketed this year. It doesn't have to be an assistant principal. We could look at more like a dean of students, like Chris said, a teacher with an administrative endorsement who could help out with some of the discipline and the athletics piece of it. And Montgomery County, for example, they hired additional middle school assistant principals this year for Blacksburg and Christiansburg because of the increased discipline. So they now have one principal and 3 assistant principals. We just feel like probably something is needed because we went from having 4 middle school administrators and 2 half-time athletic directors to 3 middle school administrators and 1 half-time athletic director. Even though it's 2 schools, I mean, it's 1 school now, they probably have twice as many activities as we had before. So we're open to suggestions, but we just feel like something else, and there needs to be another piece put in place at the middle school.
There's been more and more activities added to the middle school. I mean, we've seen there. And he's been overwhelmed. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's just, he's absolutely been overwhelmed.
Well, if you think about it, at DMS, so if you were the AD, part-time AD at one of the 2 old middle schools, you basically had boys basketball, girls basketball, track, volleyball. That's about it. And now it's, I can't even count the number. We've added baseball, softball, soccer, boys soccer, girls soccer. It's significant. I mean, sports we've added.
And B teams and stuff.
B teams and cross country.
Yeah, it is. It's I mean, he's overwhelmed.
Didn't they request a full-time AD?
They did.
For presentation?
Yeah.
So you think that if by adding disciplinary side to it and a full-time athlete, they'll be able to do both?
I kind of question that too, if I hear what you're saying. Dean of students and athletic director is going to be a pretty big job for one person.
Yeah, Montgomery County, they have an assistant principal assigned as athletic director, so that's the closest in size to us, and they had a model we could look at, but they now have 3 assistant principals, one of whom is also the athletic director and a principal at each school.
I would say it's rare to have even at the size of our middle school, a full-time athletic director that wouldn't have administrative responsibility.
I think they ought to be athletic activities director. Where they do both of those and then put an assistant principal there as well.
Both an activities director and assistant principal.
Put an assistant principal there, and then whoever is the athletic director also picks up activities.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Just look at doing it too. I feel like there's a need for it.
Yeah.
I think we're just gonna overwhelm them if we try to go ahead and combine it.
Okay.
Well, and really, if you look at all the activities that our new PR person is planning to institute at the middle school, gosh, dance and fishing and
Air rifle.
Air rifle,
Air rifle
ski,
coming.
all that, I think that,
Chess.
Yeah.
chess, oh goodness gracious.
Another
Yeah.
admin would certainly lighten the load for the sped meetings and make that go a lot smoother than it has lately, because that has been a struggle. So if you did an AP, that's the other piece that would be very helpful for them to pick up.
Yeah, it's been an overwhelming year with
Yes.
just an increase in discipline. It's probably 30 or 40% higher at secondary schools than what it was pre-COVID.
So that might help with some things that you're requesting to do, is that what you're saying?
I think it would be helpful to have another administrator there, because what was the calculation I gave you? 458 meetings for the school year is what we have without amendments or without manifestation or without a call requested meeting. So that's just eligibilities and annuals. And if you're looking at the 3 administrators who are currently there, we're having a great deal of difficulty getting all of our meetings in and remaining compliant, because it's just a time crunch. So an additional 4th person would definitely be beneficial.
Would the part-time athletic director, would he then teach PE full-time? Would he go, or what would we do? Would he be satisfied giving up that part-time athletic director title and responsibility?
I thought one of those recommended is that we do both an assistant principal and an activities director.
With the activities director, could that be a 10-month position versus I guess a teacher's scale at a 10?
I mean,
You might want to make it 10 plus 10.
I think maybe 11 months, because they're gonna have to do with the football schedule and how long it's gonna be before we have golf down there.
what is he doing in his other
Probably next
part-time?
Soon, yeah, soon.
He's a PE teacher.
He's a PE teacher, but how many, he doesn't teach he has some blocks.
He has a planning and an extra planning for, so half his day, he teaches 2 periods.
So we would need to hire another PE teacher then too?
Yes, to make that,
Or a halftime PE teacher, and we could look at the high school needed an additional one, and they've got somebody doing halftime social studies and halftime PE right now, so it might be possible if we could work it for them to do half and half, and then the high school wouldn't have to have another full-time teacher. We can look at those schedules.
I just think that's.
You win, Tim.
One person.
I agree.
That would be horrible. I would cry every day on the way to work.
Graham, just got a message on 3rd. Yeah, we finished 3rd, boys finished 3rd in state. Yeah.
gosh, I thought we were in first.
We were first going into
Going into
the
the final.
one, yeah.
Relays,
So
yeah.
they didn't trip that boy?
No,
The
no.
kid must have ran really well.
Yeah. Apparently somebody challenged it. Dave didn't say who, it was probably him, because he said that they wouldn't put the kid's score up forever.
I'll tell you what, you just had 2 more state champions come out of our track program, with Jacob Turner and JJ Gully.
Yeah.
JJ Gully jumped 6'5".
Can we get them to our school board meeting? Is it too soon to do it next week?
To get, we're planning to do, wrestling next week. We can probably get track in there too. Hopefully the girls will still be playing, so we'll have to get them in April.
Yeah, if we can get those tracking, that would be great. Make the meeting a little longer,
Yeah.
but let's do that. If we're amenable.
If we don't do it, then another board will do it before we
That's
do
what I'm
it.
thinking.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm thinking.
And it should be done by the school system, before anybody. Before
No
anybody.
argument.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chris. We
No,
sidetracked you.
You're fine, you're fine.
I was gonna
You
say,
can
did
go
y'all
with
finish
that.
while
We're watering now.
My vitamin D, we're all on.
So I guess moving on to the next slide, we heard a proposal from a community group about adding a paraprofessional for every kindergarten classroom in the county. To accommodate this request, the numbers that Dr. Sears gave me would be an additional 19 pairs would be needed. The total projected cost of adding those paraprofessionals, and this is just using the proposed pay scale and entry-level salary, would be $364,809. If, for instance, roughly half of those pairs were to elect employee-only health insurance, and that total cost would then increase to $445,929.
And if we were to offer pairs VRS, you'd have to add that in.
Oh, yeah, that would
Well, with-
go up significantly.
So we would expect that would be similar to what you had for the other group.
Yeah, it would be,
Whatever that amount was, 70-some thousand, 160-some thousand.
well, that was for all of the paraprofessionals. This would just be
Okay.
for 19, so I'd have to calculate that. I can do that right now if you want me to.
Yeah, if you can do it quickly, see what we.
Just a estimate.
What's your deadline for today?
Mama's gonna drive to Knoxville tonight. I told her I'd try to be there as early as possible.
Okay. You've only got, thank goodness, a few more slides.
I can do this later.
Okay.
We're almost to the end.
We are almost to the end, I promise.
And then we do everything.
So, I don't
So,
mean to sound complaining, but this is my third time of sitting through it today, so.
Have you been to it twice?
that's true.
Well, it sounds like your own fault.
He's been through it 3 times, so
I've been to.
Cabinet's been through it
They'll say
twice.
to me, I'm going to a certain meeting. Do that.
So just a couple more budget needs. This would be in the non-personnel areas. I think you heard from Mr. Whitaker about our student Chromebook replacements. Of course, we now have Chromebooks for all of our students in every grade in the county. However, at the high school level, those were mostly funded by a state e-backpack grant, which is phasing out after this year. The Chromebooks at the middle school were provided as part of the project budget, and the elementary Chromebooks were paid for with the original award of ESSER federal grant funds. So we now need to begin the replacement cycle, and if we want to do at least 3 grades per year, which is at a bare minimum, beginning next year, that annual cost to our budget would be around $445,690.
We used to buy books.
Mm-hmm.
We buy Chromebooks.
Chromebooks now.
Do we have any students that waive the use of a Chromebook because they have something at home? Or is that a significant number worth even noting?
I can't really speak
I
to
think
that.
we issued them to everyone regardless of what they had at home.
We're having trouble getting some of those back now. But
I think it makes it easier in the classroom if the students are all using the same.
Well, when you look at buying the Chromebooks for the kids, and they can use them in every class, how does that compare to the cost of having to buy textbooks for every kid, for every class?
It's
The cost of
less.
a Chromebook
It's
would probably be about equivalent to the cost of 3 textbooks,
Mhm.
3 or 4 textbooks. But we still have to pay for, I mean, the classes that we have textbooks, we pay even for the online version, don't we? It may not be as much, but it's still a significant amount.
Plus the printed materials.
Yeah.
I just think that the students really need to be very familiar with the use of technology every day, from kindergarten all the way up, because they're going to be using it from now on, and that, to me, is part of education and then preparing them for whatever comes next for them.
Absolutely right. Soft skills is using technology, knowing how to send an email, attach something,
Absolutely.
open a database.
for all of those who had trouble using the Chromebooks at the beginning of when they had to use a Chromebook, those were the ones that we had not provided that type of education to before. And by keeping those Chromebooks in their hands, they will, their tech skills should be very good. And quite frankly, they're still behind. I know they're still behind other systems in this state that have had use of technology for years. And to yank those things back out, that's just, to me, that goes against,
We can't take them back. They've gotten too used to them.
Kids and teachers.
Oh, everybody. And it's a benefit all around.
Mm-hmm.
We can't.
We agree. So the final non-personnel budget need that we have tonight, it would be for the, in BDOE budget language, the information services budget, what we know as the public relations budget. In addition to the salaries and benefits for that position, we also need to create a new budget for that department. Currently, we're using the superintendent's budget for that. At this time, really the non-personnel expenditures that we would expect would be in the area of printing and postage. I can't see that we would be doing anything else other than those two items right now. And so the recommended starting budget for that would be $60,000, $24,000 for printing, and $36,000 for postage. That's based on the estimates on the last mailing that we did. If we did 6 newsletters a year, as well as any other newsletters that we want to send home through the schools, that was just a good estimate that we came up with for those costs.
We did get a lot of positive feedback on the newsletter that we mailed out last week.
We did?
Yeah.
Good.
I think some of the city Radford residents like them too.
I am a city of Radford resident and I received mine.
Did you enjoy it?
I did. I'm waiting on the feature on like maintenance or something.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I thought it looked wonderful, and I think that all the school board members need to take a turn writing a column for it.
And I think that's
You have lost your feeble mind. I don't write anymore.
we discussed that, suggesting that last week, maybe having the chair do the first one at the beginning of the year, and then each month asking a different school board member just to write a brief summary.
I'm all for that.
Yeah.
Mr. Benson, we can accommodate you.
You got a fair little work with me.
Yes.
I think,
Hire me a ghostwriter.
well, we can do that. I think everybody, we all need to be visible in that. Yeah, get somebody to write for you. I'll write it for you, put your picture up there.
So the last page, and this is what you all been waiting on, just a recap of these budget needs that we've reviewed tonight. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but we've talked about these costs. The total amount of for these would be $4,475,885. Their estimated state revenue increase that we covered at the very beginning of the presentation would be $2,937,561. So that would give us a budget shortfall of $1,538,324 in meeting these needs. And again, these are starting points for discussion. There could be, some of these numbers could go up depending on the conversations tonight, and some may go down depending on your decision with the budget. But I think now would be the time to hear from you and find out about your priorities.
Well, I know Mr. Benson has got to go.
I guess maybe the best way to approach it would be, is there anything on this list that you would want us to scratch off?
And I think the VRS for the bus drivers is definitely something, you know, that you're gonna talk to them about, so we're not sure. if
Yeah.
that's-
Yeah, we can put a question mark
Yeah,
beside it.
yeah.
I can see if I can do a meeting together, maybe Monday evening.
Would it,
Maybe we'll let them speak to them.
maybe we should just go ahead and plan another meeting for mid-March to do the budget. That'll give them time to meet with the bus drivers, not trying to rush it. Because I seriously doubt we'll have the capitals before the end of the week anyway, in which case we won't have a budget proposal to vote on next week. With the 15th, Tuesday the 15th work as a date for approving the budget.
At 5 o'clock.
What is it?
At 5 o'clock.
Yeah, 5 o'clock.
We'll be ready to Ides of March.
Yeah, we're supposed to.
They were checking us at the door, swords and daggers.
I mean, I can lay it out for them, but you can give it a.
Chris, have we heard anything about insurance yet?
We have had a meeting with Anthem, and they are recommending right now an increase to our, of course, let me first start off by saying that since we're a self-funded plan, we basically can determine our own rates, but the costs that we have to pay that are embedded in those rates, some of those costs are determined by others. So Anthem is proposing an increase. They have their negotiations with their consultants, but they are proposing an increase to our stop loss fees, which are part of the rates that we build, that we pay for reinsurance, and the administrative cost as well. And this is mainly because they have not raised those fees in the past couple of years. So I think they're probably accounting for a couple of years of stable rates. So I do expect a rate increase that we would be paying to Anthem. However, that does not, keep us from deciding to keep our rates stable for the coming year. In fact, the budget rates that we use, because our health insurance fund right now is about $6 million, and it did increase last year due to some of the favorable claims that we saw. So
our surplus is going up every year.
air surplus has gone up every year, yes, sir, even with the reduced rates. So I cannot see, of course, we would have to discuss this with the county, but my recommendation would be until we start seeing a reduction in that surplus, would be to keep the rate stable.
That's better than Montgomery County.
That's good news.
Yeah, that's great.
It's, that's, to me, I think you don't see why we increase that right
And maybe if we saw a full year or two of decreases to our
now. Yeah.
surplus, then I think we would probably need to.
Well, that's big in our value prop, when we talk to employees from other school divisions and so forth, and we're more competitive on the health insurance side. That's a little bit, in favor of us, of course, and so that certainly helps out.
I don't know of anywhere else in the country that could say in 7 years, there's never been an increase in health insurance premiums, and it's actually less, like 10% less now.
We've got some people paying probably half what they were paying 7 years ago for health insurance. That's incredible.
Well, maybe Montgomery County's got to raise their salaries in order to cover their increase in health insurance.
She reduced mine $65 in 5 years. That's not like half, but it's close.
That's good. That means you need to pay for the golf or something.
Man, anytime. I offered to pay for the beer, but you're a cheap date on that.
Yeah, all you have to do is buy me a Diet Coke.
All right, so we'll work off of all of these in our proposal, other than making just a few adjustments here and there as we get things finalized. Is that,
I think you probably are gonna need to, make recommendation on priority because,
Some of them gotta go, right?
yeah, that's, you know,
Yeah.
Most of your better sales on the 9th, Chris. And I'm pretty good. But I don't know about 1.5.
All we can do, I think at this point in the year, all we can do is present our needs.
That's right. That's right.
And then, you know, obviously, we've never had a budget where we didn't have to go back to the drawing board and make those tough decisions. I expect that'll be the case this year as well.
so the 5% increase for teachers, is that, has that gone through all the way, everything that needs to go through in Richmond?
No, ma'am, actually, the House, but my understanding is that the House budget only provides for a 4% increase plus a 1% bonus for FY '23, and then the Senate version has the full 5%, so
So those numbers may even change.
they may change, yes.
pay raises for teachers, that's the top priority. Pay raises for everyone else is the second priority. That's how we've done it every year.
Yes.
And then we'll work everything else into the proposal, and once we find out what.
Yeah, I think Chromebook replacements.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do those. I think it's
Yeah.
got to stay.
And for me, I would have to say budgeting for the positions that we're currently paying for would be a definite need.
Yeah.
And I think our
Don't you almost have to
raises
leave the
for
minimum wage
custodial
ones?
That's right.
Well, I think it's, I think
Yeah.
you got that, didn't you?
You got that?
Raises for teachers first and then raises for everybody else.
Yes.
If we
Never mind, you got it.
if we don't adjust
The
it,
minimum wage
basic
change.
rate.
I also think we need to try to hold hard the assistant principal at the middle school.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
think we need to have one principal per grade level. We may not be able to do that and the athletic director all at one time, but it would be nice to be able to do that, do both, but I could forego music and art teachers before I forego.
Okay.
I mean, I would love to have the arts and the music teacher.
Yeah.
I think they're extremely important, especially in the elementary level, but I really think the way things are going from what I hear in the schools with discipline, we need that additional
Yeah.
assistant principal at that middle school.
Okay, so the priorities, pay raises for teachers, pay raises for others, Chromebook replacement, paying for the positions that have been created, and the AP at Pulaski County Middle
Of course,
School.
you know, when we get that new bus person, that's going to be eliminating a lot of Jess's job, he could go down and work as an AP.
Yeah.
Go down there and do the discipline.
I'll be looking for a new director.
Somebody was trying to get him to go to preschool today, and, yeah.
I volunteered.
I'd probably have to post it all.
Dr. Sears is aware of it. We-
Jess won't even look in a preschool classroom, he just turns his head and he looks by.
He was subbing one time when it was snowing, and we were talking about having to leave school, and I went down, I picked on the glass, and I went, I was like, I'm not going in there, you come in.
Maybe the last time the parents for every kindergarten classroom.
Oh, yeah.
Put that in there. I think
And
that's-
on that, I don't want to take parents, and I'm not saying that they don't qualify. I don't want to take parents away from special ed. But I would like to try to, as I said in the board meeting one day, I would like to try and use some of the students at New River who have had some some daycare experience or childcare experience. So, you know, maybe if we put it in there as a associate's degree preferred. Not necessary, but preferred.
It's gonna be two very different skill sets because the way the regs are written, that VDOE, you have to have a highly qualified pair. So you would have to work on two sets of skills. And what I have written down as an idea was as an associate's degree in early child development.
What's your minimum number on, I know you want, what'd you say, 19? What's your minimum number?
That one's a Dr. Sears question because it's the kindergarten classes, not the.
Yeah,
You know, that would put one in every classroom, and I think that's really what we've been asked to shoot for,
yeah.
and what the county has been asked to fund by the community group. You know, could we do something with less? Yeah, you know, it probably, it's not gonna be as high quality as, you know, I think at least from the conversation that I've had with the group that advocated with it, you know, they feel that our kids deserve at least what West Virginia has for their kindergartners, which is a pair in every classroom.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I mean, I agree.
Well, I think ideally the smaller classroom size would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
the big thing, but we don't have nowhere to put it.
Yeah,
We've started comparing ourselves to West Virginia.
Yeah.
But
I still think the full-time AD is important too.
yeah, okay.
I know you're trying to,
Yeah, Madam Chair.
We're gonna add everything back.
Yes. Actually, I did. Yeah, before we adjourn, if Mr. Stafford, if you could, I think we got a guest, just could you introduce him?
Yes, would you, I'd like to introduce our new Director of Human Resources, Ms. Ashley Coble. I'll let her, if you would like to tell, I know she's a Pulaski County native and a Pulaski County resident. I also know she was a student of Mr. Atwood's at some point. I guess she turned out okay. But Ashley, do you have any words you'd like to share with us?
I'm super excited. As he said, I graduated in 1994. I think Mr. Bradley sent me an email and I thought, do we have to say that it was 1994? And my husband actually graduated in 1990, I think. So my family was born and raised here. I'm super excited to start giving back again. So thank you for having me.
Well, welcome to the war.
I think you hired the right one.
Ashley's son, Seth, is his name?
Yes, Seth is my son.
He did an internship a few years back with the chamber, with the video production class. And he came, I think they came and presented at a school board meeting and showed the video they created for the chamber.
He was one with all the curls. Yeah, that's mine.
And he's now with the Bravo Network, is that
He's
right?
working for Bravo in Atlanta on the show Married to Medicine. And he just finished that, and now he's working with the guy that was Iron Man or something. I don't know. I can't keep up with him. So he has some really cool stories. I'll just share that.
Robert Downey Jr.?
I think so, yes.
My wife's gonna be jealous. My wife is jealous already.
Yeah, oh wow.
Well, I'll just say welcome as well. I know we've seen each other before, maybe at a SURE meeting or something, I'm not really sure.
Probably.
But
You
I
look
have
familiar.
seen you. But welcome and
Thank you.
look forward to working with you.
Do you have a CDL?
I do not, but I am willing to try anything.
There we go.
And I
Be
think
careful what you say, Ashley.
There we go.
Class starts tomorrow.
Actually,